Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll give it just a couple of minutes as folks start to come into the room. We have an exciting program for you today, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. I'm John Torres with NCBA CLUSA, and we're extremely excited to partner with our friends over at USDA for today's presentation. Today we're going to learn about USDA's new Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program. This program is part of USDA's Build Back Better initiative to strengthen critical supply chains and our food system. During today's webinar, you'll learn how cooperatives can benefit from this program and have the opportunity to ask questions directly to USDA staff. So as we get started, I've just got some quick reminders. This is a webinar, so your cameras and your mics are going to be muted. We will be taking questions throughout the webinar, so feel free to ask those questions, and we're going to answer them during a dedicated Q&A section a bit later on in the program. To ask those questions, please look at the bottom of your screen and click on the Q&A button. It should be on the bottom of your Zoom window there. Click that and you'll be able to input your question, and we'll use that question there in the question and answer portion. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording is going to be made available early next week, so be sure you share that link once you get that. And with that, I'll turn it over to our moderator and the President and CEO of NCBA CLUSA, Doug OBrien. Hey, Doug.
Thank you, John. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time this Friday to be part of this really important conversation. I am Doug OBrien. I'm the President and CEO of the National Cooperative Business Association. We, of course, are the apex association for all kinds of co-ops. Here in the United States, we are very pleased to be able to partner and host the USDA to share some really important and timely information for the cooperative community. And today we do have Dr. Karama Neal, the administrator for the Rural Business-Cooperative Services, as well as Mark Brodziski and Jeff Hudson, leaders in that agency, and particularly in the guaranteed loan programs. As they will describe, there's a significant set of resources to help build a more resilient food system, and co-ops are very much part of that scope in terms of some really significant guaranteed loans. We're excited as we read through the initial announcement that came up earlier this week on the many places that it is envisioned that co-ops could participate in this lending program, and ultimately in building a more resilient food system. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. As John said, as time goes on, housekeeping wise, please use the question and answer button at the bottom, and we'll curate those questions after we get to hear some really important presentations from the USDA team. And with no further ado, I would like to welcome and hand the mic over to Dr. Karama Neal. Dr. Neal.
Thank you so much, Doug, for that kind introduction and for the invitation to speak with you all today. We're really thrilled to be here. And again, welcome this opportunity to share more about this program and really this larger effort that we're excited about. So I'll just do a bit of an introduction and maybe contextualize this a bit, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues to share a bit more specifically about this program. So again, as y'all know, the pandemic has exposed, next slide please, the pandemic has exposed and exacerbated numerous vulnerabilities in America's food supply chain. This has created extreme disruptions. For example, the reduction in meat and poultry processing capacity is just one example of the food supply chain bottlenecks that are affecting small and mid-sized farmers. But we're seeing those kinds of bottlenecks, we're seeing these kinds of brittle systems for a variety of foods, particularly in the middle of the food supply chain. So in response to these and other constraints in numerous systems, not just food, but numerous systems, in July, President Biden issued an executive order promoting competition in the US economy. Given that and the funding provided by the American Rescue Plan Act, right now we have a once in a generation opportunity. I've heard that phrase so many times here. I think it from people who've been involved in this sector for a very long time. A once in a generation opportunity to ensure that farmers and ranchers and others in the food supply chain have better access to market choices and an opportunity to build our local and regional food systems. Next slide. All right, you can stay here actually. One of the ways in which we're responding to this opportunity is through the new Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program that we're here to talk about today. USDA is using $100 million in funding from the American Rescue Plan to back approximately $1 billion in guaranteed loans to help finance things like working capital, facilities, equipment, and other investments in the middle of the food supply chain. What do we mean by the middle? These are activities such as aggregating, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, or distributing food. So pretty much everything except production and retail and sort of institutional kinds of purchases, those kinds of things. We are now accepting programs for the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program from lenders to guarantee loans of up to $40 million to help eligible entities expand meat and poultry processing capacity and to finance other food supply chain activities. We're offering a 90% guarantee to incentivize lenders to provide fixed interest rate loans to eligible borrowers. Again, you'll hear more about the specifics of the program going forward. Because of the need in the meat and poultry processing sector, we've placed special emphasis on processing plants, mobile slaughter facilities, butcher shops, and these kinds of entities that increase the meat and poultry processing capacity. To that end, 19% of the funds are reserved for our meat and poultry processing project. I'm going to talk about two more things before I turn this over to my colleagues. First, I'd like you to imagine a possible applicant. Consider it's a group of producers, cattle, pork, chicken, or maybe some other food product. They have formed a cooperative to collectively process or transport or store their product, but they need a loan to get started. They go to their credit union, for example, to seek access to capital. That credit union likes the project, they find the financials promising, but maybe they have a little bit of concern about the level of risk for this new venture. So they visit the website, which I'm going to share with you, rd.usda.gov/food supply chain loans with an S, all one word, food supply chain loans. And they reach out to us at rd food supply chain loans at usda.gov. And they learn that the loan they are planning is eligible for a 90% guarantee. That makes a good deal even better. So the lender at the credit union is more eager. The producers are also pleased because they'll be able to increase their income and be more likely to earn a living from their farm or from their ranch. And this is, it can be a variety of those who are participating, but I do want to say, particularly one of the things that Secretary Vilsack has emphasized, and it's certainly important, is that people who farm or ranch be able to earn a living on their farm, and having these kinds of producer run, oftentimes cooperative run, kinds of activities in the middle of the food supply chain helps increase that likelihood. So we're really particularly excited about those kinds of projects. It's second, next slide, it's clear that strengthening the food supply chain priority. That's what we're talking about. There's significant emphasis on that at the department and from the larger administration. Our other priorities, though, are also relevant for this program and for our other rural development programs. So, these include three things. One, assisting rural communities as they recover economically from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, with a particular emphasis on assisting disadvantaged communities. Two, ensuring that all rural residents have equitable access to rural development programs and benefit from rural development funded projects. And three, reducing climate pollution and increasing resilience to the impacts of climate change through economic support to rural communities. So as we think about those kinds of priorities, a number of them can be very relevant, again, to the kinds of projects that might come through the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program. Given that, I encourage you to visit rd.usda.gov/priority-points. That's a link that describes these three priorities in depth and provides the public sources of data for information on how these are being used in RD programs, including the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program. Provides information there on how those priorities are being used. So to sum, we are very excited about the kinds of projects we'll see, the kinds of ways cooperatives in particular can be involved, because we know the important role that they play in communities. And we're excited to see how these projects will help build capacity in the food supply chain and make sure it is more secure, more diverse, and more resilient. To that end, we invite you to visit rd.usda.gov/food supply chain loans. I'm sure that link will be in your details. You've probably seen it already. Visit that link to learn more. And in the meantime, I'll turn this over to my colleagues, Mark Brodziski, Deputy Administrator of RBCS, and Jeff Hudson, Business Analyst. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. And thank you for all of you for joining us today. We are excited to be connecting to really roll out this program. We're now just over a week in and glad to engage in conversation. I'll walk through a little bit of the program highlights and we'll try to provide you some examples of types of projects and activities within the program. Just kind of starting out from, let's say, a bureaucratic perspective. So the program itself is a brand new program. Rather than taking time and the efforts to go through a rulemaking process because of the need to roll out quickly, we roll the program out through a funding notice. So this web or slide references the link or includes the link to the notice. The notice is available through the Federal Register, but also we set up a program webpage. The webpage also includes the program notice. And at the end of this presentation, we'll also give you a little bit of an insight as to additional information that's available on that webpage. Kind of walking through again, kind of the overview of the program. You heard Dr. Neal give some of the highlights, just to reiterate a few of those. So when we refer to funding, this is a guaranteed loan program. And as we walk through this, some of this might sound familiar with those of you that are engaged in our business and industry or other guaranteed loan programs. Of course, a lot of the program here is modeled off of our existing guarantees. We thought we'd take advantage, of the infrastructure that's in place, but there are some differences. We'll try to highlight those as we walk through the program. As Dr. Neal noted, we are already open for applications. So with the notice published last Thursday, we are open and accepting applications. Applications, or the applicant, is a commercial lender in this program. So businesses, borrowers would work with lenders, and the lenders submit the application to us. We have, again, an infrastructure set up for receiving of applications. We are delayed, though, 60 days in taking a final action on an application. We're required to provide Congress a 60-day notice in standing up a program. So rather than delaying the rollout of the program, we thought we'd roll out the program and then include the 60-day notice as we're starting to collect, start, and process applications. If and when we start receiving applications, we will start processing. It's just the actual approval date we'll have to hold until February 7th or later. One of the highlights we want to make sure everybody's aware of this program compared to many of our other programs within rural development, this program is not limited to serving rural communities. So any and every community, both rural and urban, and all the U.S. territories are eligible for this program. So it's geographically as broad as we can possibly be with any of our programs. I think Karama noted a little bit of the details as to the loans, rates, and terms. I thought I'd just highlight that a little bit. The maximum loan amount in this program is $40 million. We don't have a minimum, so we can serve anything from small loans up to loans of $40 million. From the lender's perspective, the program will offer two different guaranteed rates. It's either an 80% or a 90% guarantee. For the borrower's perspective, the reason that we're offering a 90% rate is try to incentivize lenders to offer a fixed interest rates on transactions. We feel that with the current lower interest rate market, if we can tie in interest rates to the lower market, that would remove some of the risk for these types of projects in the long run. So we're trying to incentivize a fixed interest rate by offering a higher guarantee percentage for those lenders. We do not have any terms or fees associated with the program. Many of our guarantee programs do have a guarantee fee or some renewal fees. This program does not. Again, trying to keep the barriers of access in the program as low as possible for the borrower. I'm going to go through kind of two slides talking about the borrower and the use of the loan funds, kind of the purpose of loan funds. And you'll see that we're using a lot of similar language between the two. And that is really to focus, as Dr. Neal noted, in operations businesses that engage in the middle of the food supply chain. So first of all, the types of entities that are eligible for this program really is any legal entity. It could be a for-profit, a nonprofit. Of course, cooperatives are included in that as far as eligibility. Could be Indian tribes, could be tribal groups, public entities, or of course individuals. So wide open as to the type of ownership structure. The eligibility requirement is that that business be engaged in the middle of the food supply chain. We're not saying that that has to be their primary purpose. So we could have a business that is engaged in processing, let's say of meat, but their primary line of business is ag production. That would or could be an eligible applicant as long as they're engaged in the middle of the food supply chain. And we'll talk a little bit more some examples in types of projects. The business must be engaged in a commercial food product. And we have a definition within the notice. There, what we're looking for is simply scale, that the project is, and the business is of the scale where it can sustain itself, from a commercial basis. We also are requiring that the project would be meeting the requirements of either the USDA Food Safety Inspection Service, and that would be for requirements for any projects engaged in processing of meat, poultry, egg products, and catfish, and all other food products and food ingredients must comply with the Food and Drug Administration requirements. And then a little bit looking at as far as the actual use of the loan funds. Again, the loan funds, so the purpose of the project must be to support either the startup or expansion of activities in the middle of the food supply chain. A couple of maybe some clarifications on some definitions there. When we refer to expanding, that could include physical, so physically expanding capacities of facilities, could be new facilities, adding on to existing facilities. But there are some operations that could expand by improving efficiencies. Maybe it's adopting more technology and expanding their throughput through those types of activities. That also would and could be eligible, for the program. We're also looking at, of course, any real estate or infrastructure associated with the real estate along with equipment, but also looking for worker safety and other improvements. Again, looking for ways to build more resiliency in the food supply chain. At the bottom of my slide here, you'll see reference to some cooperative stock programs into the new market tax credit structures. I do have a couple of follow-up slides. We'll dive into details a little bit there. But before I do that, I'm going to do is turn over to Jeff. And Jeff's going to provide a little bit more insight as to maybe some perspectives on what we're seeing from questions, types of projects and other activities to help maybe put some color around when we talk about the types of businesses and types of projects that could be eligible for this program. Jeff?
Okay. We got a call this morning, food manufacturing, urban area, looking at moving from an old facility to a new facility. Smaller project, $4 million, definitely fits in there. One issue that comes up as we talk about this one's doing within state processing, so they do have to move towards a FSIS inspected or food service inspection service inspected facility to be eligible. We've had a lot of inquiries on slaughter. Western United States, Southwest United States are coming in. Probably one of the questions that's come in that's a little harder is we're seeing some questions on the retail side, grocery stores, and again, the program is considering that at the end of the food supply chain would not be eligible for this program. What else have I been responding to? A lot of questions coming in from borrowers on how to find lenders. And again, based on the new nature of this program, we really don't have a list of lenders that we can just say this lender is interested in processing these, or recommending working with your local lenders. Again, any FDIC, NCUA, FCS lender is eligible to submit an application for this program. Mark mentioned this a little earlier. We're accepting applications, but I don't believe yet to date we've received any applications. I think we're still a couple weeks out on receiving applications. And another big question on the fixed interest rate has been coming in from the lending community on what we mean by a fixed interest rate. Mark did a really good job of covering that in his definition, is fixed for the entire life of the loan. I think that covers the highlights of what I'm seeing so far, Mark.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Hopefully that also spurs maybe some thoughts and some maybe some discussion when we get to our Q&A as to types of projects. And also, yes, Jeff, thank you for highlighting types of lenders. Whereas any commercial lender, any lender that is under the supervision of a federal or state agency is automatically eligible for the program. Of course, it would include credit unions, farm credit institutions, along with your commercial banks and lenders. Non-supervised lenders could also be eligible, but they would need to go through an application process. So there are some state licensed or other lending institutions that are not under the supervision of a federal or state agency that are active in our other programs. They are also eligible for this program rolling forward. I gave a little teaser as to want to talk a little bit about cooperatives and cooperative stock. Some of well, this regulation or provision within the program actually mirrors what we have available through our business and industry program. We really feel that this program offers an opportunity to really engage with ag producers and really help producers and regions kind of re-engage in the food supply chain. We think that this program would help meet the Secretary's goals in expanding markets for ag products and ag producers, but also looking at some of our priorities around rural and economic development, of providing economic opportunities for our rural residents, building wealth in rural communities. And I'm sure I'm speaking to the same efforts that many of you are working towards. So we want to make certain that we have opportunities here for investing in co-ops kind of within this program. And there are a couple of different ways that this program could support cooperatives. And I'm listing three here on our slide. One is, like our business industry program, the guaranteed loan, or the loan that's being guaranteed, could be made to individual farmers or ranchers. And the use of that loan fund is to invest as an equity investment into a co-op. So basically paying for their initial investment to a member into that co-op. So again, that's one use of our loan funds here. We also could invest in or use a guarantee a loan that makes a loan to a fund. So this is a fund that would then use the proceeds to further invest either as equity or loans to cooperatives. We actually have a investor firm that is anxiously looking for this as an opportunity within our program. So again, there's an opportunity for this program to make a guaranteed loan into a fund, and that fund reinvest into cooperatives. And the third highlight on here is kind of a broad brush, is that loans could be made for basically it's conversion of or establishment of either worker-owned cooperatives or converting a business to an ESOP, again, to help with that equity transfer from a private ownership into a cooperative or ESOP ownership. Again, some opportunities that we're hoping here within the program. Of course, we also could use the program to make a leveraged loan directly into the co-op. And those could be combined. In other words, we could have a loan for stock through the individuals, and then the co-op itself be a borrower in the program for additional financing. If we are looking at kind of leveraging the use of funds, the maximum loan of $40 million would apply to those various purposes. So if we have financing in the equity side and on the debt side, the combined would be limited to $40 million. Now, I hope that spurs some interest in you. If there is, let's say, more interest in more discussion or detail on that area, I will be glad for that. We'd be glad to follow up. So if you have an interest in either a small group discussion or setting a follow-up webinar with us, we'll be glad to talk about further opportunities within the co-op equity side. I just also wanted to mention an opportunity to utilize the Treasury New Market Tax Credit Program. And this one also mirrors what we have set up in our business and industry program. And this has, in essence, three ways that we can utilize the New Market Tax Credit Program. The first one on here actually is no longer, well, it's used, it's available, but it's not used much. It's when we could make a guaranteed, the loan would be made by and guaranteed to kind of in the middle of the tax credit structure. So it's to the CDE, the community development entity that is actually has the allocation and making the loan into the project. I say that isn't used as much now because we actually fine-tuned our second structure here, and that's being able to guarantee the loan into the fund itself. And that's what we refer to as the leverage equity structure. In the first one, the guarantee goes to the CDE. In the second structure, the guarantee goes to the commercial lender. So it really opens up access to the leverage funding into the transaction, which is where, and that's why most of our new market tax credit transactions now are following that method. So basically, it results in using the guarantee for purposes and for eligible borrowers, just like we would outside of the new market tax credit structure. It just flows. The loan funds flow through the structure. An advantage of that is then it brings in the equity, the market tax credit equity into the project. And that equity typically is about 25 to 30% of the total project cost. The third way that we could be involved is kind of in parallel to. So in many cases, the new market tax credit program is being used to support longer term financing, longer term projects. So typically the real estate side of a business or business development. So another opportunity is for our guaranteed programs to then finance the equipment and do that as a parallel loan directly to an operating company within the business structure. The advantage of all three of these is that, of course, the new market tax credit brings equity into the project and to help reduce risk on the debt side. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing in that. And again, if there's more interest in more detail or discussion on that piece, just let us know and we'll be glad to connect and walk through more details. A little bit as to kind of ongoing here where we are on the guarantees as far as the processes and how this program will be administered. We're going to continue with applications on an ongoing basis. As we noted, we're open for applications. So as we receive, we will process. The notice talks about a priority scoring process. The only time we would actually need to utilize the priority scoring is when we're basically at the end of the program, when we have more applications on hand than we have funding available. And just then to prioritize that last tranche of funding, we'll use our priority scoring process. Lenders could have two different ways of starting the process. They can go right to a full application. So if the transaction is ready for the lender to be underwritten, they can provide the full application to us. But in some cases, lenders have questions, about some eligibility issues, about structure. So we have an opportunity that they could submit a preliminary request. So it's a request for a preliminary eligibility review. And that would typically need a lender's, basically what they would typically look at as a preliminary review within their banking structure, the documentation, is what we would need to review for preliminary eligibility. So it should be a relatively low level of paperwork and low lift for lenders, but a way for us to connect with lenders and potential projects. Just as a highlight, though, all projects are required to meet our National Environmental Protection Act requirements. What that typically means, if the project is within the confines of an existing building, so it's more of equipment or other improvements to a facility or to an operation, it's pretty low level. But if it involves construction or a new build of a building, there's a little bit more level of a degree of environmental reviews. If it is construction and a higher level of a review, we encourage lenders to work with us early, and we can start the environmental review process before they submit a complete application, just to help with the timeline. Last I thought I'd highlight is all projects are also required to provide a feasibility study. I don't know if we highlighted maybe adequately when we talk about the use of loan funds. Debt refinancing is a possibility within the program, but only as a minority use of funds. The majority of the loan funds have to be used for improvements and expansions to operations. And because we're looking for that, the expansions, we want to see that the expansion is feasible. So we are requiring a feasibility study for all projects. The scope of that feasibility study may vary a little bit depending on project to project. A new business, new startup will require likely a little bit more detail. A project that is expanding could likely rely on some of their experience and proven success record, and then just build their feasibility study as to focusing on the expansion pieces and the risk associated with that. Again, we have a feasibility study guide on our website, the program website. Speaking of the program website, this is again another link to it. The program website, in addition to the notice, has a fact sheet that we prepared, just trying to highlight some of the features of the program. It has a frequently asked questions list to it that Jeff is deeply engaged in. So as we're receiving questions, once we start seeing some patterns or maybe some areas that we think really do need some clarification, we're going to expand that frequently asked question list. So if you're interested in that, kind of check that once in a while. That may answer some concerns or questions with you. There is a lender enrollment process. The enrollment is really a system of how we're going to receive applications. Applications will be submitted electronically. So the lender enrollment just sets them up in that. There are some guides prepared both for lenders and borrowers to help through the application process. We have an events tab. So that's as we're hosting webinars. And these are the webinars that we host directly. Will be both the registration, the announcement of the webinar will be posted there along with recordings. So again, we encourage you to check in with that. As we hold and post webinars, the recordings will be available for you to listen to. And last, we have a contact us page. So basically, it's a way of asking questions. It's a little bit of a form-driven process. So it helps identify kind of who's asking the question, kind of what their general interest area is, and of course, the question itself. We also have, of course, an email box set up. And if you have any needs for additional information, or if an alternative way of asking a question would be through our email address directly. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn back to Jeff as to any other thoughts or insights that we want to highlight from here, and then we'll go to the chat and Q&A. To Jeff.
Going back, I think the website provides a lot of the guidance that borrowers are looking for if they go through between the frequently asked questions, covers a lot of the, seems to be covering a lot of the questions that I've been receiving. When I mentioned about eligible lenders, I forgot to include the CDFIs can apply to the program to become an eligible lender. There's a process for the CDFIs to walk through that a little more involved than what we call a regulated lender, but there's an option there for the CDFIs to also apply to be eligible lenders. And the other big question is, and I think I said this earlier, is trying to find lenders to participate in the program and having lots of conversations with lenders across the country that are looking to participate in the program.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. And incidentally, we are hosting a webinar for lenders on Monday. And if you are a lender or interested more in the credit side of things, feel free to join that. The registration for that is on our program website. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark and Jeff. A great, a really nice job of presenting some really important information and a lot of engagement on the Q&A. So looking forward to, and I'm going to put a few of these together. We're pulling them from the Q&A and we're kind of putting them together as we go. A few of them, there's a few themes here. Let me ask one. I think you covered this, but let's just talk about just timing once again. I think you were really clear in that you're accepting applications almost immediately, but it's going to be 60 days, which is early February, before anything could be approved, which it takes a little time to work with the lender, et cetera. So that probably is not delaying anything. What's the back end? How long does this program last?
Well, the funds are available until they're fully used. So we really do not have an established ending date. I think I don't know. It's we thought that we would have a kind of a slow ramp up and maybe looking at for the time period. We know that there's some strong interest in some larger projects. We know we have, as Jeff noted, a lot of conversation about smaller projects. Yeah. So it's going to be just really available until funds are expended. Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Then let's talk about you, as you well know, co-ops, with their special business organization, that the types of guarantees can sometimes be pretty important. It's an issue we deal with the Small Business Administration. We've been continuing to deal with. So could we just just talk a little bit about the potential need for a personal guarantee. And I think this one, the particular question came from small group of folks, 3 to 5 people who are just doing a startup kind of co-op. Will there be a need for a personal guarantee? And then maybe you can say, in the other example of an established co-op that already has maybe hundreds of people, do they need a personal guarantee?
Yes, so for the program, kind of our standard is for an entity of individuals or entities that have an ownership of more than 20%. So if an individual has an ownership of more than 20% in a co-op, it would be required to have a personal guarantee. Owners of less than 20% are not required. There may be some cases where the lender, would have some concerns or interest in setting other standards. Of course, the lender would need to meet their lending standards, but our program would not require a guarantee, particularly a quote. Well, I think the math is what, more than 5, right?
Right.
As far as owners would not require a personal guarantee.
Okay, good. That's clear. Appreciate that, Mark. A number of questions on how I know we've got a number of folks who work with food, either directly from food co-ops or work with the food co-op ecosystem. And so just a little bit more clarity on eligible borrower, but then and then eligible purpose. So the hypothetical of a startup co-op that really envisions helping local and regional producers access their retail, their food co-op, and some of that would get into the sort of middle, the middle part of the food chain in terms of purpose. But tease that out for us, Mark and Jeff, if you would, please.
Well, I'll start, and then if Jeff or Dr. Neal want to step in, please do so. So you're right. It is a little bit of, I think, intentional in the sense how we drafted that is because, we know in the real world, there's not solid lines, right, as to the food supply chain. Maybe for starting points, when we say middle, we mean pretty broad. So if we look at the ends, what's not eligible would be ag production and harvesting. And in reality, anything beyond harvesting from the supply side is eligible.
Okay.
As through the processing, storage, transportation, distribution, all eligible up to the point of really the retail of basically handing to the consumer would not be eligible within the program.
Okay. All right. So just I think there's so much interest in it. I'll do a quick follow up. So if there was a food co-op that was say putting together even part of their store was really about further processing, bringing in even sort of the end of the distribution chain, if you would, and part of their food co-op, I'm going to make up some numbers to do that part of the facility is $150,000, for instance. Could that be an eligible an eligible purpose for this program?
Yeah, I think we could, we definitely foresee some projects that maybe carve out, right? There may be a overall project, and within that project, eligibility for this. That's definitely something that we would foresee. And that may be, yes, further processing. When we say, yes, food processing, we don't mean just the front end. It could be value added or other processing throughout. So, that piece of it would be eligible. I think I would add, if the other activities are not eligible for this program, we could look at other programs that we have, the business and industry program or others. So, yes.
Yeah. No, that's great, Mark. I think that, what I take away from it is that if you're a food co-op that's doing some work in that space, it's definitely worth more conversation and examination, for this program. And then, as you say, there's other programs within RD that might also be there to help, whether that's the guaranteed loan program for business industry loan, or perhaps even some grant programs. So that's great. Right.
If I may add to just if I may add to, I think the use of funds, as Mark said, is going to be really critical. And also encourage applicants to submit an eligibility determination letter. If they want to be thoughtful and intentional around that, we'd love to receive. That's not required, but it'd be great to have that, and that can help the potential applicant really kind of get close on the details to decide whether or not this is whether it is eligible, what they might need to do to make it eligible, those kinds of things, where they want to do that. So very much encourage that. And I'll put the email for questions in the chat as well, so folks can have that easy access to that as well. It's also on the website.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Karama. Here's a pretty precise one. Is an eligible purpose finding markets or market development?
Okay, I'll maybe share some. Jeff, do you want to start with that? And I'll
start with, I don't see how we're in the middle of the food supply chain. I'd need a better picture drawn of how the market development is going to land to improving the resiliency in the middle of the food supply chain. It's an open-ended question of how they're asking it. I think we need to see a little bit more of the picture, going back to that preliminary determination, seeing what the overall project is going to be composed of.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that might be needed to help with the feasibility study also. So it's kind of a front end piece, right?
All right. In the feasibility study, that is an allowable or an eligible purpose.
The cost of it is, yes, but that would be on more of on a reimbursement basis, of course. But right.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. Very good. Let's see. You talk a little bit. There's a few in here about startups. There's a few startup food co-ops, and I think other startup co-ops that are interested in how do you think this program would work with startups?
Yeah. Startups are listed as an eligible activity in the notice. A little higher, there's a little bit more of an equity or contribution requirement for a startup, but startups are definitely considered an eligible component of the food supply chain program.
Okay. And of course, we have if the entity is a co-op or a cooperative model, of course, we have a staff, available to help with any technical assistance that might be needed. And we are linking back to some of the cooperative development centers kind of in this space. So there may be other opportunities for some technical assistance and help with the actual, I'm going to say more the organizational startup, right?
Okay, good. Yeah. And I just want to take a moment to highlight the express eligibility of worker co-ops, which I think is just really important for the co-op community. I can think of a few food processing cooperatives that are worker owned, and certainly there's many more. Could be a lot more interest in that. So I think that we were very excited from the cooperative community to see that. Let's see. There's startups. Let's see. I think that there was a question about contact information, but Dr. Neal, and I know you've been dropping some things in, and there's some great slides. And again, we'll be sharing the presentations and the slides very early next week. Here's a couple quick ones, just kind of popcorn here. I think are Fisher cooperatives involving seafood processing eligible?
Would be deemed, is deemed eligible in the program. They would have to be falling under the FDA inspection on the processing side. That would be the one caveat that we'd put there. Okay,
very good. Thanks, Jeff. And does the program prioritize historically underserved communities or populations, and how does it do it if it does?
Maybe I'll chime in on that. I actually was just about to put that link in the chat as well. So at the close of my little segment, I mentioned our priority points, and the priorities of rural development. There is a lot of that is spoken to there, particularly in terms of geographic priority. And so you'll see those maps, you'll see those locations where folks are at both those points. I think Mark mentioned earlier, though, that in terms of this particular program, those points are only used towards the end if the pipeline exceeds what funding is available. But I'll put that link there, and you'll see that. And those point systems will apply to some of the other programs. Also put a list of some of our other programs there as well. So you'll see those there as well.
Very good. A quick follow-up. Thank you for that, Dr. Neal. Is a veteran preference, will that be included in that information? Is there veteran preference generally?
There is, if I remember correctly, and it's listed in the points section of the NOFA. You'll see that, but again, that only comes into play if the applications have to be competed because of all the funds have been used, or the funds are close to all being used.
Right. Very good. All right. Thank you. A couple questions here that are going to, they're going to be pretty, it's your answer is going to be, well, it kind of depends on the loan, but just to give, I think there's some really exciting, there's some folks in the audience here who aren't that familiar with the Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program, or, and so if you could just kind of give a flavor of like, how does this thing really look like typically? Things like, one is around matching funds, and that's a term of art that maybe doesn't apply here, but probably just some idea of what kind of capital do people generally have to bring into these kinds of projects, and then just some general timing. How long does it take to secure and finalize once you kind of get serious about it to the time that you can be using this capital to actually put a shovel in the ground or something like that.
On the equity side, we have an equity table in the NOFA. Existing operations at a 10% matching fund or matching requirement is listed in that table. To new startups requesting guarantees in advance of a project that involves construction up to 25%. So there's a table that in the notice that covers the different contribution, matching funds, equity, what we call equity funds into the program. Mark?
Yeah, I would just add to that is we kind of set the base. So the minimum lenders are required to meet their lending standards also. So some lenders may have some other standards with this. Typically with the guarantee, they have a little bit more flexibility. So you will be still within their standard, but maybe at the edges of both from equity requirements, maybe size of loans, loan terms. Our guarantees typically would offer repayment terms much longer than they would without a guarantee. And again, as we talked about, the opportunity for interest rate structures of including a fixed interest rate that hopefully would give some advantage to some these types of projects.
Right. Good. Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. And in general timeline, I know it's impossible to predict on a particular project, but what's a range, do you think?
Yeah, I think it does vary quite a bit depending on the nature of the project. Right now, as I mentioned, the National Environmental Protection Act, the NEPA review process, still coming out of the pandemic, depending on what the issues are. I mean, we've had some projects that the environmental review really drives the timeline. If it's a major construction project, will take some time. We've had other projects that we can approve an application, in 10 days or less, if it's well structured and the kind of the hurdles of the environmental review are completed already. It's really driven by the project itself as to the complexity of the project. And I think the better the lender and borrower are communicating together and preparing that loan package, definitely helps us on our review.
Right. Good. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Mark. A real quick and easy one here. I mean, I own a family century farm and looking to build a vegetable/value-added processing facility. Would I be eligible to apply for a guaranteed loan through this program?
My opinion would be, I believe that would be an eligible use under the food supply chain guaranteed loan program. Again, the devil's always in the detail when we get there, but from the 30,000 foot we're sitting at right now, that appears to be an eligible project.
Yeah, that looks right in the core. Very good.
I'll also just
go ahead.
real quickly. I'll just say real quickly. So I saw that question too. I put a link in the chat to the Value Added Producers Grant Program, which may be also of interest to that particular questioner.
And I think that's a good segue, actually, Dr. Neal. There's a couple questions in here, and I realize you're so generous with your time. We're at about 50 minutes after the hour, but I think it might be worth taking just a couple minutes talking about how some people might put the puzzle together. In terms of how you really can get this funding together, and there's two different realms. Someone mentioned there's some legacy entities that might be in the community. They may be co-ops, they might be regional foundations, they might be others who really have an interest of seeing their food system being built out in a in a certain way, in a just, equitable, healthy way. So, how could these kind of entities, whether they're philanthropic or otherwise, fit into it? And then either part B, or you can take it in the same question, just talk a little bit more about other government programs that might help, put the puzzle together. So that's a mouthful, but I know this team is up to it.
Maybe I'll take a first pass, and my colleagues can certainly chime in on other things as well. So a few things I would say. One, we recognize this, we're not going to be able to solve this problem, fully transform the food supply chain on our own, just at USDA, even with the significant investment that is being made. And so we are looking to other partners. Just on last Tuesday, we had a finance forum that actually was recorded, and I can make sure that you all have the link. So if that folks want to share that and see that, we can share that with the folks who are here. But what was I think helpful about that forum is we heard from the Secretary of Agriculture, Thomas Vilsack, who framed this work and talked about sort of the larger scale, not just meat and poultry processing, not just this particular loan guarantee, but the larger scale issue with regard to the food supply chain. We also heard from the National Economic Council, Samira Fazli, who talked again similarly about putting this in the larger context around why this work is important. So again, not just narrowly these particular programs, but why is this important more broadly? So again, we'll share that. We also had a panel of lenders, really a panel of people in the finance sector. So it included CDFIs and credit unions and banks and farm credit and philanthropy as well. So recognizing that it does take a village to really do the work that is needed here. And so we'll share that link to folks as well. And I think we just, are open to, if there are other entities who want to talk with us, want to partner, want to think through how we can work together on that, we're doing that as well. The last thing I'll say is, as I alluded to, the Secretary is thoughtful about this being a part of a much larger scale amount of work. So we encourage you all to sign up for our listservs on the USDA list, on the Rural Development list, so that as these programs come available, some of them will come through Rural Development at our BCS, some of them will come through other mission areas at USDA. But sign up for those lists so you can see when those opportunities become available, and if they're a match, consider applying for them.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Neal. I think I have just one more, and it's a nice little precise one. You did a fantastic job, Karama, of talking about how this is really part of a bigger, effort, and there are some resources to put the puzzle together. This last one, though, real focused. What's the cost for the preliminary eligibility review and or full application?
That there's no cost coming on the USDA side. There's no fees associated with this program, so we are not charging anything. Lenders could be charging customary fees, whatever, that's lender driven, and that's negotiated between the lender and the borrower. But we have no fees established in the notice for this program. Right.
Thanks, Jeff. And I kind of wanted to end with that to as I'm kind of seeing this, is that USDA is doing everything that it can to make this as accessible as possible. Because as Mark mentioned before, that there are sometimes, it's part of how the finance and how to get the program off the ground is that there are fees involved. There's not in this one. And I see that as a signal for this is for the big tent, for small and startup, at least to examine the potential. So we appreciate that, and the cooperative community will take that to heart. I think we covered it all. Thank you so much. This was fantastic. I'll just ask Dr. Neal if you have any parting comments.
Just again, thank you all for inviting us to share with you today. We really appreciate the opportunity. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all always, and particularly about this important opportunity. We look forward to hearing from you all directly for questions. And if there are pieces where you see maybe there's a gap or there's something that you need, let us know that too. Maybe there's something that we can do in this program. Maybe there's something we can do in some of the other kinds of things that we are developing now. So we look forward to hearing from you and being in touch. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neal. It's always great to have you with us. Mark, good to see you again. Jeff, thanks so much for your time. We will have this posted early next week. The USDA team had mentioned that they're going to send some other resources over. We'll make sure we'll kind of package that all together. So when we send this out, that will all be in one place. A great bit of information here today. We look forward to continuing the conversation and hope that everyone has a great weekend and looking towards a great holiday. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.